Hey guys, it's Kevin in my review for Dune Part 2. And this film we are, of course, picking up after the events of the last film. Paul and his mother have now basically aligned with the Fremen. Paul is determined to learn the Fremen ways and hopefully use this as a way to take down the Harkonnens and everyone that destroyed his family once and for all and reclaim the power that the Atreides used to have. And, oh my god, I mean, I was pumped for this film. Do I really even need to say that, though? I feel like this is a film that everyone has been looking forward to for a long time now, ever since, part 1, and we got the confirmation that there was a part 2 happening. I think everyone's been really hyped for it. It was supposed to come out last year. Hindsight, I'm kind of happy that it didn't, because, as you know, I didn't really do many reviews last year, so this is a movie I might not even done an individual review for. So I'm glad that it came out in a year where I'm actually trying to get back into YouTube semi-regularly and things like that. And I mean, this film was easily one of the most anticipated of the entire year. There was so much potential for what they were going to do, the way they set things up in part 1. I was just really excited to see how it was all going to pay off in part 2. And especially getting to rewatch it like a month or two ago, just really reminded me how phenomenally they set everything up, how they did such a great job of establishing all these different ideas and all these different, groups and factions and the world and things like that. I think they did such a great job with that, and I was just so excited to see how it was going to pay off here. And oh my god, to say this film exceeded my expectations, I feel like would honestly not be doing it justice. This is one of the most stunning, breathtaking, spellbinding works of sci-fi. Is easily one of the best of its kind that I have seen in a very long time, and I'm so excited to talk about, but we are, of course, going to start off with the cast here. And similar to the first film, I mean, where do I even begin when it comes to the performances here? I mean, this is just one of the most insane ensembles of any film I have seen in a very long time. There's so many just amazing actors here working at the top of their game, and really, I mean, everyone just rises to the occasion here and gives such a breathtaking performance. But of course, we have to start off here with Timothée Chalamet, who, listen, in the last film, I was very impressed by what he did as Paul Atreides. I think that, a lot of it was very subtle what he was doing, like diving into a lot of the confliction and things like that, but also I think the fear that he had when it came to these visions and the possible futures, he dived into that really well in that film, but here it goes even deeper with that, and as a result, Chalamet has to give a much more challenging performance, and holy shit, I don't think I have ever seen him quite on this level before. He has given some amazing performances, but this might just very well be his best work yet. I mean, just the levels of versatility that is required for an actor in this role are monumental. I mean, just the levels that he has to deliver in this movie. I don't really want to get into it too much. It's very hard to talk about it without spoilers, but Paul goes through a really big transformation in this film. He starts off the film the way you saw him in part 1, but the way he ends the movie is not anywhere close to what you saw, and the way Chalamet is able to convey that so effortlessly and just pouring his heart and soul into it. There's a shift that happens like halfway through this film, and I don't really want to talk too much about it. I'm sure you've heard it in other reviews, but when that happens, I mean, Chalamet just blew me away here. I already knew he was such a incredible character actor, but here he is just displaying a range that I truly did not know he was capable of. There's one scene especially involving this speech that Paul gives, and it is just so incredible to watch, and it really just captivates you. But also, again, the levels of emotion that you feel, watching this performance and knowing what this means to Paul. I mean, he just conveys that perfectly here. It's such a multifaceted role, but he pulls it off with flying colors, and again, really just does a great job of showcasing that this is a tragedy. Like, everything that happens to Paul is very very much a tragedy, and I think Chalamet just really portrayed that to the best of his ability here. There really should be, I think, no question whatsoever if he was right for this role. I saw some people kind of unsure about that in the first movie, but here, I mean, I think he shows that this was very much the right casting choice, and just, again, I think is going to shock you with just what he is able to convey in this film. Even if you are a fan of Chalamet, I think this movie just gives him so much more to work with in a way we haven't seen before. But I gotta say, Zendaya is another actor that I was very impressed by in this film. You know, I feel like she was someone that we were really excited to see in part one, and then she wasn't really in it that much, but thankfully she's in this movie significantly more. In fact, she's basically a co-lead in this film, and gives such a phenomenal performance here. It's a very subtle performance. There is dialogue that Chani is given, but I think her best moments in the movie are all conveyed through her facial expressions, because Chani isn't really for a lot of what is happening, and a lot of the devastation and a lot of the again, just a lot of the devastation and a lot of the overall just emotions that you're feeling is because of Chani, and it's because of Zendaya's performance. And, you know, seeing her and the love that she forms for Paul, but then seeing, you know, where she ends up going throughout the movie, it is absolutely heartbreaking to watch, and Zendaya is really a big reason for that. I mean, her emotions are just so incredibly palpable. I've always said this, she's such a great actor in terms of just how she emotes, and this film just really showcases that perfectly. Just the look in her eyes and how she's feeling and things like that. There is one scene especially that is very crucial within the film, but I feel like could have easily just been conveyed just like as any other scene, but because of Zendaya's emotions, it is so much more powerful, and it actually heightens the tragedy of that scene. And I think that she just did such a incredible job, and again, just really showcasing how incredible of an actress she really is. I mean, she is just an actress that is constantly delivering, but I'm really happy to see she now is given a role in a movie that fully utilized her talents. Not to say they haven't been before, but I feel like aside from like Euphoria and Malcolm and Marie, she hasn't really had that role to like fully sink her teeth into, and thankfully this is very much that role. She is by far one of the best of her generation. This film very much continues to showcase that, and the chemistry between these two is just so well felt throughout this movie. You really find yourself latching onto the both of them. It feels very natural and raw, and really is like the heart and soul of this entire movie. Like, their relationship is such an integral part of this film, and both of these actors just sell it so well here, and I thought their chemistry was just so well handled. Everyone else here is really great in terms of the, returning actors. Rebecca Ferguson, once again, such an incredible force of nature in this film, giving a much different kind of performance I really wasn't expecting them to do, considering the first film, but she really is someone that, similar to the first film, I mean, your attention is, like, fully on her every time she's on screen, but it's a completely different energy in this film, and she just really kills it here. I fully bought into everything they were trying to do with her, and I thought she just did such a phenomenal job. Josh Brolin, once again, is also really good here, just like he was in the first film. But I gotta say, Javier Bardem really steps up his game in this one. Not just the fact that he's given a much bigger role in this movie, so he has a lot more to deal with, but I also think he represents a lot of the hope and the optimism that is there throughout the beginning of this movie. He's kind of like the he's kind of dichotomous to Zendaya, who represents, like I said, a lot of the devastation and the tragedy. I feel like Bardem is representing the hope and the optimism that he feels throughout this movie, and you really do feel that from Stilgar. He is so staunch in his beliefs. He is so convinced of what is happening, and that this, the path that Paul is going on is the correct one, and he really doesn't want to deviate from it in any way possible. And I think Bardem just did such a great job in portraying that, really showing how someone can be so married to their beliefs that it can completely cloud who they are. And I think that he just did such a phenomenal job in this movie. I thought it was just such an incredible performance. He also brings a sense of like levity to this film that I really wasn't expecting. He actually has a little bit of like, I wouldn't say comedic relief, but there are moments where you do end up laughing. And I think that he just did a really great job here. So I was very impressed by his performance in this movie. Stellan Skarsgård, once again, just so menacing and just grotesque to watch throughout this film. Dave Bautista also, I think, is a big standout this time around. Liked him a lot in the first movie, but here we dive a little bit deeper into what Raban is all about. What is his character? What is the dilemma that he's really dealing with? We dive a lot deeper into that in this film, and I thought that worked out really well. But I gotta say, as strong as the main ensemble is, it really is the new characters that stick out even more so here, specifically when it comes to Austin Butler, who, holy shit, I mean, I can't think of an actor that has had such a huge boost in their career so quickly, more than Butler has, because, he plays Elvis, he nearly gets an Oscar, he nearly wins an Oscar for it, giving such a convincing performance in that way, and then you get to this movie, and this is the complete opposite of that. I mean, the character of Fade Rotha is so cunning and downright psychopathic in his, in his mannerisms. He is someone who is so rough and, animalistic and cruel to everybody around him. And Butler just transforms into that menace so well in this movie. I thought that he just did such a incredible job. And though he isn't on screen like as much as you expect him to, every single time he is, your attention is fully on him. I mean, it is such a enthralling performance with what he ends up doing here. He is really just bringing so much to this role, and it really is the kind of just attention-stealing type performance that we just don't get to see enough of. I've heard people compare him to, like, Heath Ledger as the Joker, and while, like I said, he doesn't have as much screen time as, say, Heath Ledger did, I think it's similar in the sense where, like, you know that he can be great, but you don't expect him to be as good as he is. It is such a imposing performance that is just so instantly iconic. I think when we look back on both of these Dune films, Butler's gonna be one of the things we look back on first. I think he's gonna be one of the first characters that comes to mind, and really, I think just puts it into the pantheon of some of the greatest villain performances out there. Again, he is just such a he is just such a force to be reckoned with in this movie. And again, Austin Butler, he just relishes every single second of it. He's very quickly becoming one of those actors where, like, you give him the right role and he will just do wonders with it, to the point where he is so unrecognizable. He's done this 2 movies in a row now, and I'm just so excited to see what else he is going to do in his career. I think he has such a long career ahead of him, and again, just what he was able to accomplish in just these 2 films alone, I cannot wait to see what else he is able to deliver on. I think he is just, again, such a incredible actor that gives such transformative and believable performances in that way, and again, it's just truly insane how good he is in this role. I thought he just did such an incredible job. Florence Pugh is also really good here. Again, not in the movie as much as you think she is, but for what she has, she does do a really good job. Christopher Walken, I thought, was very good for what he had. Some people I've heard said he was miscast and things like that, but I thought he was very convincing in the role as the Emperor. Very, like, despondent and things like that, and I think that he does a good job in conveying that in the movie. Léa Seydoux, not in the film all that much, but really everyone just gives such a phenomenal performance here, whether it's Charlotte Rampling or even Souheila Yacoub, who plays Shishaki, who is like Chani's best friend. I thought she did a really great job. This entire ensemble is just so spellbinding to watch. Everyone really is acting at the top of their game. And while similar to the first movie, some of them, like I said, they don't have the most screen time, everyone makes such a strong impression. I don't think there's a single actor where I saw the performance and I didn't get anything out of. I felt like every actor I got at least something out of. They conveyed these characters' hopes, desires, their fear, whatever they're dealing with, in just such a successful and, effective manner. And I was just so blown away by the ensemble here. All right, but with that said, now we have to get to the directing and the writing, which, holy shit. I mean, listen, Denis Villeneuve is a director that I've always really loved, whether it comes to the layered human stories he's telling, these thematic stories, but especially when it comes to sci-fi, just the way he looks at it and things like that. It's so distinctly different from other directors out there, and, you know, with the first, with Dune Part 1, I thought he did such a great job of just, like, showing his passion and his overall just admiration for this story and how much it really means to him, really seeming like his dream project coming to life and him finally getting to construct it. But I gotta say, here, I think his directing is even better, because here he really is able to show what he's been trying to do, I think, his entire career. This is exactly the movie that he's wanted to make for the longest time, and now that he has an even bigger budget to do so, and he has the time to do so, I mean, he can construct his best directed feature yet. I think especially when it comes, obviously, to the grand scale and things like that, we know how good he is at delivering that, and my god, I mean, it is just incredible to behold here. You are so blown away by this movie. I'll talk more about that when it comes to the cinematography and things like that, don't you worry. But I think what really impresses me about Dune Part 2 is how well he is at conveying the tone of this movie. Because yes, the film starts off, and like I said, there is a sense of hope. There is a sense of, you know, sort of epicness to it. It feels almost Spielbergian in that way, with the kind of hope that we're getting, with the kind of story that's being told. But there's this underlying darkness throughout the movie, and it was hinted at in Part 1, but it really is amplified so much more here, and throughout the film, that darkness just continues to increase to the point where it really just ends up taking up so much of the movie, and that hopelessness that's applied to this film would not work nearly as well if it wasn't for Villeneuve's vision, and just, again, what he is trying to communicate, his full understanding of the story. He does such a great job with that. It's important to note that the book of Dune, when it first came out, a lot of people misinterpreted, like, what it actually was all supposed to be about. What was the actual meaning of this story? And I feel like Villeneuve recognized that and said, how can I make this theme come across in a way where people can't misinterpret it? And how can I really showcase the dread and the true darkness of the story? And he really just did such an excellent job here. And the film is just so skillfully directed in that way. Again, you really just feel every single emotion of what he's trying to capture. Every single feeling is, you know, you feel it in this movie. Everything just feels so visceral and things like that. And I think he just does such a great job at constructing the story. And I think after this film, I mean, while I would definitely say Denis is one of the best working today, he also may be just one of the best to ever do it, because just the way he understands such this dense and complex world is just so impressive to behold. I feel like a lesser director would be intimidated by this source material, would be too intimidated, in fact, that they would be able to convey it in a way that felt convincing. They would be able to do it in a way, and it just wouldn't feel as effective as it is. Yet here, Denis does it with just such ease and confidence, and he does it in a way that no one else really would have been able to the point where I really just can't think of anyone else that could have constructed this film in the way he does. I mean, I think he truly is one of the masters working today. There's a conversation for him also being one of the best to ever do it, I think. I know he didn't get the Best Directing nomination for the first film. I can't imagine he would bypass this one. I mean, just the effort and just the amount of artistry on display here, there's no reason why he shouldn't be nominated, and I think it honestly could get him all the way to a win. I was just so impressed by his directing in this film, and it's just some of the best I think you'll see in any movie this year, let alone a sci-fi film. I think he just does such an incredible job with that. But yeah, I think the directing here, it's just pitch perfect all around. There's even, like I said, little moments of levity and things like that, and it makes the film feel so much more lived in that way. The fact that, again, we're able to get such a dark story, but yet have this little, sense of comedic moments. And it never feels jarring. It just feels like it just organically fits in with the story that he's trying to tell. with that said, we got to get to the screenplay here, which honestly I think might be the thing that impresses me the most in this film. Because while the first film I think did such a great job of just laying out everything and getting you to know all these characters and getting you to understand, this world and everything like that, this film just expands upon that in such an amazing way. And I knew that this was going to be a lot more challenging of a film, like, going into it. I remember people were saying in part one, no one is ready for part two. Like, people who are feeling some way about part one, they're gonna feel so differently about part two. And after seeing it, yeah, I can very much understand that, because there are so many things that part one hinted at, but you didn't fully understand what it was hinting at until you see this movie and the story that they are actually trying to tell. And while, yes, I think the story of Dune is one that is very well known, I don't really want to get too much into what it's really all about without you seeing it. But what I will say is that, well, yes, I think part one threw a lot at us and it introduced many of the ideas. I think this actually is to part two's benefit, because now that we know everything that's going on, this film can get a lot weirder. This film can get a lot more complex with its ideas, and you never really feel lost as to what's going on, because you know what they're talking about. When we hear things, when we hear about the Fremen, who we spend a large majority of this movie with, a lot of this film, especially the first act, is getting to understand the Fremen, getting to know their ways, how are they able to just basic necessities, like how do they get water in this desert and things like that. Things like that I just found so incredibly fascinating, and the film spends a lot of time on it, and getting to see Paul kind of learn those ways in an environment he's not familiar with. I think that's some of the most compelling moments of the entire film. But what's even better, I think, about that is, while yes, we're fleshing out the world, it's also the characters themselves, who I think are just that much more richer in this film. Every character is so incredibly fleshed out in this movie, and there's nobody here that I felt like we didn't get at least somewhat of a explanation of. Everyone has their own sort of philosophy, everyone has their own sort of feeling towards what's going on. And I think for Paul, I mean, what you witness with him in this movie is nothing short of one of the most impressive character arcs, I think, out there. Like, it's very easy to see why Dune became such a sci-fi classic, because of Paul's story and what he ends up undergoing in this film. Because, again, not only is he still haunted by all of these, visions that he's having, they're constantly plaguing him. He wants to do whatever he can to try to stop that. But you also see him kind of waffling back and forth in this film, because in the previous film, he really wasn't sure if he was up to the task of becoming this leader, of assuming this role that his father once had. But in this movie, he starts to get a much better idea of what that really means. What is this really, offering him? What does he really get out of it? And you see, as a result, he starts to become a little bit more enticed to the idea of it. He really does start to, but he really starts becoming something else. And he's really, while everyone wants him to become different things, you have the Fremen who want to become something. You have his mom who wants to become something else. There's so many different things that he can become, but yet you see him in this film fully embrace that. And is he willing to embrace that? And I thought that was just such a compelling arc for him, because, like I said, in that first part, it's all about him kind of speculating what it's really all about. Here, it's about him knowing what this could entail, what these visions have implied, and what can he do to try to stop that, and can he stop it in that way? And I just found that to be such a compelling arc for him. Everything we see with Paul in this movie, and him learning the ways of the Fremen, but still not knowing if he's up to task to take on this very domineering role, I found to be so interesting in this movie, and I just really loved what they did with his character so much here. And like I said, where he goes halfway through this film, while it's going to be jarring for some, I think they planted the seeds so well in this movie of what they were trying to set up that it never felt jarring to me. It felt like this fit in perfectly with the story that they were trying to tell. I feel like it made perfect sense why Paul went down the path that he does, and it just made the film that much more, it made the film that much more riveting. It made the film that much more exciting that it went. Well, I hate to say exciting because it's really it's very dark where it ends up going, but it made the film that much more effective that they went down the path that they did, and I think it worked that much better. So overall, I mean, I just really love what they did with him in this movie. But it really is the way everybody sees Paul in this film that I found to be so fascinating here. I mean, some of the characters in this movie, they straight up see him as like this like Messiah-like figure. Everyone sees him as like he's gonna be our savior and things like that. Someone like a Stilgar, for example, like I said, is so confident in the fact that Paul is going to save him and save his people and just turn everything around and, be the person to get the Fremen out of the situation that they are, even if people are constantly doubting him. He still believes it, and he's going to improve Arrakis and things like that. And I found that to be such a interesting approach for this character, and really just buying into the idea of belief systems and how someone can be so confident in their beliefs that they're willing to sacrifice so much about themselves, and they're willing to doubt anybody else who doesn't believe in it. And then on the exact opposite end, you have Chani, who, like I said, she is straight up making a mockery out of it. I mean, she sees this as so incredibly laughable. There's no possible way that this can be a thing. She cares a lot for Paul in what he's trying to do for her community, but she doesn't see him as this figure. She rejects all of that. She doesn't want him to be this leader of sorts, and I found that to be such an interesting approach to her character. They really expand a lot upon how is this affecting Chani? Why does this matter so much to her? Why does she want to fight for her people? But also, what does she see in Paul? What is it about Paul? If she doesn't want him to be this leader, what is it that she really sees in him? And I found that to be such an interesting sort of approach, because I'm sure you've seen the trailers. Like I said, Chani's basically a co-lead here, but the direction they took with her, I thought, was so unexpected. But she really does kind of end up being, I think, the voice of the audience in this movie. A lot of the time, I think you're going to find yourself firmly on Chani's side, and I found that to be such an interesting approach to this movie. I really liked what they ended up doing with her, and again, really just diving further into the idea of these belief systems and what someone is going to do to prove it, even though they don't have the full evidence of it. There's many moments in this movie where Chani is doubting what's going on, but Stilgar is just, again, so deeply entrenched in this idea that Paul is this thing that he wants him to be. Paul is the Lisan al-Gaib, that he can't seem to deviate from it. And I found that, and I think that's such an interesting idea. I think that's something that many people are going to find themselves relating to. It's like you believe in this higher power, and you don't necessarily, but yet, you don't really know how to prove it. You just know that it's there, and is it there? I think that's just such an interesting idea that this film is trying to dive into, and I think they did that so well in this movie. But there's other ideas they dive into really well here. The idea of colonization, especially, I think is really well handled in this film. Like I said, the Fremen, they have a very specific way that they live, the way they communicate, the way that they obtain certain materials like water and things like that. And, you see that this is something that they are very much strict about. They feel very strongly about these things, and seeing how Paul and Lady Jessica kind of start to challenge some of that, I found to be so interesting in this movie, and what the film is really trying to say about the Fremen people, and getting you to kind of understand. I saw a lot of people in part one saying it's just like a white savior story and things like that. Well, this film is really challenging that idea and really kind of deconstructing it in a way I don't think you're going to be expecting, and I thought they did that really well here. Just, again, the messages that Villeneuve is trying to get across in this movie are universal. Like, you can use the idea of the Fremen and apply it to any sort of culture, and someone who feels that their culture has been gentrified in that way. I think the movie has a lot to say about those issues, and I think, again, they dive into those things so well. Obviously, power and corruption are other things that they dive into really well here, especially when it comes to Paul, but also when it comes to Lady Jessica. I mean, the path that she goes down in this movie is not at all what I was really expecting her to. She has a specific goal that she is trying to obtain as well, and I can't get into it because it very much involves spoilers, but the path that she went down in this movie was not at all what I was expecting them to do, especially compared to part one. I saw her in a certain way, and you see her in this movie, and you see her in a completely different light, and again, I think they did a really good job with that. I think they still, it never felt rushed. It didn't feel, like it was coming out of nowhere. It actually felt like it fit very well within this story and, really got you to understand what they have been trying, the story that they've really been trying to tell all along. And I thought they did just a really good job with that here. And similar to the first film, we're covering a lot of ground here, even more so in here with the introductions of like the Emperor and his daughter and things like that. And so it still does a really good job, though, I think, of giving showcasing everyone's point of view, giving a, little glimpse of everyone, especially when it comes to the Harkonnens. I think we get an even bigger understanding of them in this movie, and they're in a much different spot in this film. Now that they think that they have overthrown the Atreides completely, they are pretty much panicked. They're in this, state of wanting to do whatever they can to, acquire Spaihts and, make sure that they are the ones in power and things like that. And I thought they did a really good job of just showing that hurried nature, that they are trying to maintain power. And, with that comes the introduction of, like I said, Faith Rotha as a character. I thought they did a really good job with showcasing this movie. He is very much this sociopath of sorts, and you can see how much he just relishes in the idea of being so cruel and unpleasant to everybody, but yet how much he is, how he is the person that is right for this job. And the interesting thing about Fade Rotha is that you actually don't see him until way later than you're expecting. I believe it's like halfway through the film, that's when you finally see him, but yet it doesn't feel like he is in any way underused in this movie. It feels like we get just enough of this character to understand the physicality, to understand the threat that he opposes in this film, and I think he works really well as this villainous type presence. And yes, you could have made the argument that they could have introduced him earlier on, but I feel like with the way they introduce him in this movie, I can't really think of a better way for them to have utilized him. His introduction scene especially is just so memorable in this film. They really just go all out here in, showcasing, the threat that he is, but also how far he's willing to go to achieve goals and things like that. But also how competitive this really is. I mean, the Harkonnens are such a bloodthirsty family, and you see the lengths they're willing to go to stay in power. I think they just do such a great job with that. And even characters like, say, Princess Irulan, who or Lea Seydoux' character, who really aren't in the movie that much, we still are able to get a sense of what they're really all about, what their goal is, and what they really, what's really in it for them when it comes to this, this sort of power battle that everyone is in for. What are they really trying to accomplish? What do they really care about? We get a sense of Princess Irulan and, her father, the Emperor, and what he's really struggling with, or from the Bene Gesserit, we get an even better idea of what they are all about. What is their overall mission in all of this? Really, every character, again, just feels so much more enriched here in terms of their development. And like I said, though there is a lot happening this time around, the movie never really sacrifices its characters. And that's something I was just so impressed by in this movie. The fact that some of them don't even have that much of screen time. We're still able to fully gauge what their whole story is all about, what their motivation is in this movie. That still feels so incredibly clear in this film, and I think they just did such a great job with that. Just all around, it's such a compelling screenplay. There's so many things that are hinted at early on, and the way the film ends up going is, it feels so satisfying in that way, but yet it also goes in many directions that you're not expecting it to. And again, I'm just so impressed by how emotional and challenging and just how effectively it ends up conveying everything in this film. I think it easily is, I know we're early on the year, but I'd be hard-pressed to find this not being one of the best screenplays of the entire year. I was just so incredibly riveted from start to finish. But when it comes to the cinematography, I mean, what can we even say here that hasn't been said already? I mean, this is just some of the most well-crafted, magnificent, lived in, and just generally awestruck visuals I think you will ever see. And you already knew that from the first movie, but this film, it's even more impressive to behold. And I mean, Greg Fraser is quickly becoming one of the best cinematographers in the, in the business currently. I think he's one of the best working today in the industry. And he continues to showcase that in this movie. Every location feels so well fleshed out here. And you really just find yourself so mesmerized by the visuals on screen, whether it's the land of the Fremen, this, very sandy area that is almost completely populated by it. And, you feel that sort of dry landscape that they live in. You feel every single second of it. I think they do a great job in communicating that. But then contrasting that with this very grimy and dark landscape of the Harkonnens' house, especially this one scene involving this black sun that everybody's talked about. My God, that scene is just absolutely phenomenal. The way that they are able to transport you into that, you forget the fact that it is you're confused as to why the movie is in black and white, but yet you also recognize that this is just the world that they inhabit. And it's like one incredibly visually stunning location after another incredibly visually stunning location. The thing I love about it is that it doesn't all look the same. It looks like different worlds. It looks like we're going to all these different planets, and I think they do a really good job when it comes to all of that. And like I said, the first film did a good job with that, but this film, because we spend so much time, especially on Arrakis and with the Fremen, you just get a really good idea of the world that they live in and what they have to do to survive, and it really just transports you into that so well. And then when you contrast that with like the world that the Emperor lives in and things like that, I think that also is really well communicated in this film, and I think they do a really good job when it comes to all of that. So I was just so impressed by so many of the visuals on display here. It's just some of the best I think you will ever see. And I was just so transfixed on the screen, you forget you're watching a movie. You can't even take your eyes off of what's going on. And it really, just like I said, it transports you in, and it really never lets you go. And you're just kind of stunned that it looks this convincing and it looks this real. And it's because, again, similar to the first movie, they're at these, they are actually in these beautiful locations. A lot of this is practical effects. I don't know what's practical and what's not, of course, but the majority of it seemed to be practical, and I thought they just did such a great job when it came to all of that. And that's something that I was just really impressed by, especially, like I said, though, the world of Gedi Prime in this movie, consisting of no light other than this like very black and dark sun. It's one of the most remarkably put together locations I have seen in just a really long time. You can tell the amount of detail and effort that went into that, and it's just absolutely spellbinding to behold. All of the cinematography is so well done here. But the other thing, of course, we have to talk about is the action. I'm sure you've seen the trailer. There is a much bigger emphasis on it. Now, there's not as much as you would expect, but there is definitely a lot more compared to the first film, and it is all just on another level here. Every single action set piece we get is bigger than the first. The movie kicks off with this really crazy set piece of this invasion of sorts that happens, and how they all have to fend themselves, and it's a great way to just kick off this film in such a gripping manner, and I think they did a really great job with that. But each set piece that we get is that much more heart-stopping, that much more monumental, whether it's, I'm sure, the clip you've seen going around of Paul riding the Sandworm for the first time. What a stunning sequence that is. I mean, I think when we think of Dune, that's going to be one of the first scenes that come to mind. The sequence at Gedi Prime that I mentioned, that is just downright horrifying to watch, the way that whole sequence goes down. I think they just did such a great job with, whether it's, as the movie goes on and we have those big battle sequences, and while maybe they're not as long as you expect them to be, you still are so incredibly immersed in what's going on, and it all leads to this just incredibly nail-biting third act that is one of the most heart-stopping I have seen in a very long time, and a lot of that is due to those action set pieces, but also how well they earn them in this movie. Every single set piece we feel here feels so well earned, but it also feels like this is what we've been building to. and it definitely does not disappoint in any way. I thought every set piece was just so well handled here. Again, I think some of the best action you'll see in any movie this year, but especially the knife fight we get that was hinted at in the trailer. Oh my god, that sequence had me just on the edge of my seat. White-knuckled with tension, not knowing what was going to happen, even though you might have an idea of what's going to happen. Again, the movie does such a great job of, just constantly creating tension that you still are so immersed in what's going down. You're still so waiting with bated breath to see how is this going to play out, and I thought they just did such a phenomenal job with that. So, yeah, all around, it's some of the best cinematography you will see in any film this year. I would be very surprised if there is a blockbuster that looks as good as this does, because truly what they were able to construct here is otherworldly, and I don't know how they were able to do it as well as they did, but will absolutely go down as some of the best in any blockbuster you have seen in a very long time. I think when we look back at the 2020s decade, like, this is going to be like the standard for what other blockbusters want to be. This is what they're all going to try to be. It's like, we want to try to be like Dune, but we can't quite replicate it. And I think, you really do get an idea of why that is the case, not just from this one, but even more so from part 2. I mean, just again, what they were able to do here, it's just absolutely remarkable, and I was just so impressed by the visuals here. The sound design also is just such a crucial part of this movie. It gives us an idea of just fully immersing ourselves within this world. I really just felt like you were, involved when every single noise that we hear is just so incredibly visceral, and you really just feel every single second of it, whether it's the bigger action set pieces that happen towards the end of the movie, these very bombastic, these very bombastic, the bombastic feel, or the subtler noises of just little, animals in the background or something like that. I think is just so well done in this movie, and I was just so impressed by the sound design here. But we gotta talk about the score by Hans Zimmer, because I already have sung the praises of Zimmer's work in the previous installment of this franchise, and I mean, he's just one of the best composers working today, as you already know. I don't think there really is any introduction that we need to it, but my god, this is easily just some of his best work yet. The score is just out of this world great. It just does such a great job of doing what a score should do. It elevates all of the tension and the emotion and just the hypnotizing nature that the movie needs to, but it also makes it feel so much more euphoric. It's sending chills down your spine, and it makes you feel emotions that are just so difficult to fully comprehend. And it's just one of the best musical scores, I think, of all time. I think we're gonna be going back to this thing like this might just be like his best work yet, and that's crazy to say, because Hans Zimmer has done a lot of great work when it comes to compositions, but the work that he does in this movie is just some of his best to date. Specifically, this one recurring motif, musical motif that is given for like Chani and Paul, like their sort of love music that plays. I have just not been able to get out of my head. I've been constantly going back to it. I don't listen to musical scores that often. This is one I can't stop listening to, and that really just tells you just how powerful of a score this really is, and how much it just really ends up lingering with you. And I was just so impressed by what he was able to communicate. We already know that Hans Zimmer is one of the best composers working today, but even knowing the work that he did in part 1, you're not prepared for what he's able to do here. It is just such a phenomenal work all around, and does everything that it possibly can to, again, just fully eliciting those emotions out of you that it needs to, and I was just so blown away by his work here. And then, of course, we have to talk about the editing in this movie, which, yes, this movie, similar to first film, once again, it has this gargantuan length. It's almost 3 hours long, but I gotta say, I never once felt a second of it. I think there's always something interesting going on. Even the smaller conversations that are taking place, there isn't a single scene here that I didn't feel was needed. There wasn't wasn't a single scene here that I didn't feel could have easily been cut out. Everything feels like it's advancing the story. It's getting us a better sense of these characters. It's giving us a better sense of where they are. Even if we're getting, expository dialogue, it still feels necessary to fully tell this story. And it just does such a great job of fleshing out this very complex and very layered story that for a long time, mind you, many were saying was unfilmable. It was impossible to make this into a cohesive film, and I think it really is due to that length and due, again, to many other contributing factors, but the length is definitely one of them, to where this does feel fully fleshed out. This does feel like it is possible. This does feel like it is defying the odds of what this film could honestly be, and ending in a way that just had me so incredibly stunned at the way this film decided to wrap up, the places that it ended up going. Again, I expected them to go in a certain direction, but the way it was communicated, the way it was handled in this film was not at all what I was expecting them to do. It ends in such a bleak and hopeless manner, in a way that I truly wasn't prepared for. But my God, am I excited to see what ends up happening next. I can't imagine, with the success this film has had, that we're not going to get Dune Messiah at some point. That has to be something that's going to happen. We're going to see some follow-up to this story, and just the way everything wraps up here, I can't even imagine what Villeneuve has in store to tell this story, to wrap everything up. I mean, I am so excited to see what he ends up doing here, but I'm also, at the same time, really nervous to see where this story does end up going from here on out, because it ends in such a startling manner that I think is going to have you just constantly hearkening back to, days, weeks after you have seen it. I have not been able to stop thinking about the ending to this movie. The final line, the final shot even, has just lingered in my mind since I've seen it, and it's just one of those that just really ends up sticking with you by the end of it. Ultimately, every element of Dune Part 2 is just operating at the highest level possible. It's the kind of cinematic achievement that we really only get once in a lifetime, and it's one of those films like, as you begin to watch it, you realize you're watching nothing short of one of the greatest of its kind that we have seen in a very long time. It is a true epic in that way. It captures your full attention. It hooks you in and really never lets you go in a way most films would dream of doing. This has not been a very good year for films so far. Dune Part 2 is the movie that makes us remember what cinema is capable of when it is operating at the level that this film is, when it is able to deliver what the emotions that this film is able to do, the powerful moments and everything that this film is able to deliver. It just reminds us of what you're able to get, and also reminded me of why I love doing this in the first place. Why do I love watching movies? Why do I love analyzing film? Why do I love endlessly talking about it? It's all because of films like Dune Part 2. This is a movie that is going to go down as a true landmark of blockbuster cinema for years to come. People are going to be talking about this, I guarantee you, for a very long time. And it's not often that a film like this comes around that I think is so highly anticipated and, everybody has been clamoring for, and it delivers to the degree of satisfaction that it does. But this film did exactly that, and yet it did even more than I would have, expected it to. And though, yes, it may only be the end of February, it's going to take a lot to surpass what this film was able to get. The emotions it was able to elicit at me. I've seen this movie 3 times now, and each time it has left me with the same amount of emotions, the same amount of just pure astonishment that I felt when watching this movie. It hasn't really left my head since seeing it. There's so many jaw-dropping moments here. The characters are so well utilized. The performances are just out of this world. Timothée Chalamet, Zendaya, Austin Butler, Javier Bardem. One of them has to get some kind of Oscar nomination. Like, it has to happen. Like, the performances in this movie are just operating at the highest level, with a just phenomenal and euphoric score from Hans Zimmer. Some of the most visually stunning and just viscerally engaging action set pieces you have seen in a very long time, stunning and just masterful cinematography. This film is nothing short of a true triumph of filmmaking. It's the kind of film that, like I said, people are going to be talking about for years to come. It has me in absolute awe with the levels that it ended up going. It tells this story that you're really not expecting it to. If you love the first film, I can't imagine you're not going to love this one. The first film did such an excellent job of world building that this just takes it to a whole other level, fully fleshing out all these different locations, all these different characters, and diving more into what this has always been about, all these different belief systems, and saying so much about, colonialism and imperialism and power and corruption. I mean, this movie just does such a great job of diving into all of that, and it's the kind of blockbuster I think we just don't get to see enough of. So many blockbusters these days, some of which I've talked about recently, purposefully dumb down their story to appeal to a modern audience, and Dune doesn't do that at all. This is mature storytelling at its finest, and honestly, it is the kind of film that many are going to aspire to be, but many are not going to be able to reach the level of. This was just everything I really wanted to be and more. I cannot recommend this film enough. It is absolutely the best film of the year so far, though that's not exactly a very high bar to achieve. There haven't been many films that I have loved even close to the level that I did this one, but truly, this is everything that I really could have hoped for, and I am absolutely going to give Dune Part 2 overall an A+. It has been a very long time since I have done a review gushing as much as I did for this one, and like I said, I'm very happy that this film came out when it did, so I was able to do this review for it, because I truly am just so blown away by how well this film ended up delivering and what it was able to fully accomplish. But yeah, like I said, I really just can't recommend it enough. I'm so happy to see this film is doing the numbers that we hoped it would, box office wise, and like I said, I just can't wait to see what else Denis Villeneuve has cooked up for this franchise. I know he said the last one is probably going to be, the next one is probably going to be the last one he does, but I mean, again, with just how much of a success this was, who knows what is even going to happen? Who knows what he's even going to deliver? I cannot even imagine how that's going to turn out. But either way, guys, my review of Dune Part 2. Let me know what you guys saw of this movie at all. Left your thoughts, and we'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.